Several characters rose to the level of fan favorites in the eyes of the viewers when the first season of Bridgerton debuted on Netflix. Who could resist the allure of the Duke of Hastings, the nerve-wracking vitality of Penelope Featherington, or the rebellious nature of Eloise Bridgerton? But there is one who sticks out the most in this adored cast, the sharp-witted and observant Queen Charlotte. In this video, we will be talking all about the real Queen Charlotte. Charlotte will have her own Netflix series, slated to premiere in the spring of 2023, almost 3 years after she made her debut in the popular romantic series. India Amartifio will play a younger version of the eponymous monarch in Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, produced by the same firm as Bridgerton. The show will depict Charlotte's ascent to power and union with King George III. The characters' relationships with Lady Violet, the matriarch of Bridgerton, and Lady Danbury are also discussed. However, how much of the Queen's story in both series is true? Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, will undoubtedly provide light on who the Queen is in the Bridgerton universe. Who was Queen Charlotte, the real person? Before the release of the Regency Queen's new series, here are a few things you should know about her. Sophia Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz was born in 1744 in Myro, a minor duchy of the Holy Roman Empire in northern Germany. As the eighth child of Duke Charles Louis Frederick of Mecklenburg-Strelitz and Princess Elisabeth Albertina of Saxe-Heilburghausen, she was not viewed as having a bright future. Most of Charlotte's schooling was focused on household issues, and she received little instruction regarding the ups and downs of political life. Charlotte, 17 at the time, must have been shocked when she was thrust into the British court upon her marriage to King George III in 1761. George, who was only 22 at the time and was in desperate need of both a wife and an heir, had just been king. According to author Janice Hadlow, Charlotte's arrival in England and her wedding ceremony were separated by just 6 hours. Charlotte served as Queen of Great Britain and Ireland alongside her husband from 1761 until she died in 1818. After his wife's death, George continued to rule for another 2 years until his own death in 1820. The young queen's life would soon become far more difficult than anyone could have predicted, even though their marriage was long-lasting and supposedly quite affectionate. First off, the queen struggled a lot with the responsibility of creating heirs. 13 of Charlotte's 15 children survived to adulthood. A passage from Janice Hadlow's The Strangest Family, The Private Lives of George III, Queen Charlotte, and the Hanoverians that the Smithsonian Magazine cited states that the young monarch once wrote, "I don't think a prisoner could wish more ardently for his liberty than I wish to be rid of my burden and see the end of my campaign. I would be glad if I knew this was the last time." She was carrying Prince Albert, her 14th child, at the time. The smallpox-related deaths of 2 of her children greatly affected the Queen. Lady Charlotte Finch, Prince Alfred's nanny, recalled that following her son's death in 1782, Charlotte cried enormously. Prince Octavius would pass away 6 years after the Queen and King. During the Regency period, Queen Charlotte became her husband's guardian. But Queen Charlotte's worst was yet to come. The Queen readied herself to take on the largest challenge of her long reign as a monarch as England entered a time now widely regarded as one of the most romantic in history. King George experienced his first brief episode of madness in 1765, which the Queen was completely unconscious of. However, legislation mandating Charlotte's appointment as regent in the event of the King's incapacitation was passed that same year. This changed in 1788 as George relapsed with his illness. The Queen and Prince George, her eldest son, publicly clashed over who should be named regent. Ultimately, the Prince of Wales prevailed. King George's son took the throne in 1811 when his insanity turned into a permanent condition. On the other hand, Charlotte was appointed as her husband's guardian, a role she held until her passing. However, King George's mental instability permanently altered their relationship. According to historian Catherine Curzon, the king made indecent remarks about the Queen's servants and accused her of infidelity during his episodes. After her husband violently abused their adult son, Prince George, Charlotte ran in dread of her spouse. Additionally, she stopped sleeping and eating and started ripping at her graying hair. She called on Dr. Francis Willis in a desperate attempt to find answers, and he helped George regain his faculties. But eventually, the medicines failed, and as Charlotte's disease worsened, she could not spend as much time with her husband. Although many historians think King George had either porphyria or bipolar disorder, his actual condition is still unknown. Queen Charlotte's childhood wasn't all misery, and the show will focus more on the brighter moments of her formative years. There were also happy moments, especially before George became ill. The monarch and queen undoubtedly moved into Buckingham Palace at one point. The royal couple's official residence at the time of Charlotte and George's nuptials was St. James Palace. But after the king purchased Buckingham House, things started to shift. The pair moved into the new royal palace in 1762 after Queen Charlotte fell in love with it, and Buckingham Palace became known as the Queen's House. In addition, Charlotte had a variety of pastimes that kept her occupied while she was queen. Bridgerton demonstrated how much the Queen cherished court life's social component. She was also a huge fan of music, literature, and botany. As the music teacher of Queen Charlotte, Johann Christian Bach, the son of Johann Sebastian Bach and George Friedrich Handel, Charlotte gained a reputation for championing well-known composers. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was invited to play for the king and queen in 1764 when George celebrated the 4th anniversary of his ascension to the throne. Mozart was just 8 years old at the time. Mozart would dedicate his Opus 3 to Queen Charlotte a year later. Was Queen Charlotte the first black monarch of Britain? Fans of the show Bridgerton have been repeating an old historical argument: was Queen Charlotte the first black or biracial person to hold the English throne? Ever since the beautiful Golda Rochouval first appeared in season 1 of Bridgerton. The solution, however, is not as obvious as many would want. There is proof that the Queen's Portuguese side of the family may have some African origin. Charlotte was directly descended from a black branch of the Portuguese royal family, related to Margarita de Castro e Sousa, a 15th-century Portuguese noblewoman 9 generations removed, whose ancestry she traces from the 13th-century ruler Alfonso III and his lover Madrigana, whom Valdez takes to have been a Moor and thus a black African. As additional proof of her African origin, Valdez Wycockham cites a note sent by one of Her Majesty's physicians, Baron Christian Friedrich Stockmar. The doctor described the elderly monarch as having a genuine mulatto face, tiny and twisted. Was this a racial slur or a crude remark made by a virulently racist British nobleman in the 18th century? The latter may be the case. For instance, historian Anya de Lumba argues that in Shakespeare's day, the name Blackamoor signified Muslim. It didn't necessarily signify black. Moors may be white immigrants from North Africa. In addition, Queen Charlotte wouldn't necessarily be the first black ruler of Britain, even if she were. The racial ancestry of Edward III's spouse Philippa of Hainault is a subject of comparable discussion. There is ultimately no way to know. We can only be certain that Queen Charlotte had a fascinating, convoluted life and was a complex person. Oh, and both India Amartifio and Gold Rochouval look fantastic in her shoes. That is all for this video. We will be back soon with another informative video. Don't forget to like and share this video. Until next time.